Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media production, and our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we're going to talk about how we're covering events with Ambisonic and specifically handheld mics. Now, this may seem like an odd thing to talk about for a second hour, but I really think, especially for small productions, we're starting to find a way to do this in a relatively small way that really adds a lot to the experience. You see 5.1 with crowds and everything else in very large productions, but you don't see it with someone walking around with a live view. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that pipeline of how we're doing this at events and how we get that out and process it to hopefully help you a little bit with understanding that. And we're going to keep on talking about it. But when you see us using it in upcoming events, the next time we'll probably do it as NAB. You can start to get your head around how that works and how you might be able to use it. So Mickey Makachor is going to join me, and we'll talk through the pipeline in the second hour. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
Our first one this morning comes from Sion Piscine in Manukau, Auckland, New Zealand, and it is as follows. Our disability support organization hosts a community forum, and we're interested in the Mukana question software. Is this available for purchase or subscription?
Yeah, what you should do is ping me. You probably go to either. You can contact us. I'm trying to think of the best way to do that. If you're in our Discord, it's easy because you just ping me in Discord. If not, go ahead and put it through the 090. I don't have a lot of good ways for people to contact us because usually people who do beta right now know me. So it's a really good question. If you don't, go ahead and put the question in again tomorrow. But join our Discord that goes out on the email every day. Or you can ping us through either the office hours info or 090.media info and ask for it. We are doing beta testing right now, and we are using it commercially in some cases as well. Most of our beta testing is all with nonprofits and specific verticals, but it's definitely available and it's working pretty well. So go ahead and reach out to us in one of those ways, and we'll have better ways in the future. We're just starting to ramp it up. Next question.
Next question comes from our old friend John Preto in Las Vegas. I have GPT-5 like a summary of Dreamforce's opening day yesterday, but I'm not seeing John.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I don't know why you can't see me, Bill.
Oh, there you are.
Sorry. So Dreamforce started exactly the same time as Apple yesterday. So the keynote was from 10 to noon. And Benioff came on and he said, your data is not our product. That's not what we do here. He asserts, unlike a lot of other companies. And he says, transparency builds trust. We all know what can happen when AI goes wrong. So everything they talked about yesterday was AI integrated everywhere within Salesforce and Slack, a bunch of new features in Slack, and $500 million fund for startups as well. So those were the big highlights from Dreamforce yesterday.
How was his presentation?
I didn't see the video. I just got the highlights from several different news sources.
Oh, God.
I can't find it. I can't find the video.
Interesting. Yeah, usually he's a pretty good presenter. Like he really spends more time than almost all the other CEOs really figuring that out. And he went from not being a great presenter to being a really good one over a couple of years, about a decade ago. So anyway, it's always interesting. It's not a product that I use very much, and so it's not a thing I track very much. But when you actually see him talk about stuff, his ability to present, that's what you wish every CEO could do. Next question.
Ocean Plascassier at the Otaquachi, looks like River District, says, love Feather, the topic of yesterday's second hour. How do I print out the pictures I make by Feather on my new Creality 3D printer in the way that Jeffrey and Courtney do so students can stay in person with the things we draw?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Can play in person. It might be, I think they did say that they can export an OBJ file, I think, out of Feather. Then you could take that OBJ file, maybe import it into Insta360 or Tinkercad or something that's more designed for creating watertight meshes for 3D printing. And that's one of the problems is a lot of those 3D creation programs aren't really designed for 3D printing. They don't create solids that are waterproof or solid, completely solid, don't have any holes in the mesh where the mesh is joined. Because if you have those holes or mesh joining issues, they create errors when 3D printing, when trying to export that model to an STL file, which is what the 3D printers or slicers use to slice up and create your 3D model. So you could probably take that OBJ file, load it into Tinkercad or 360, not Insta360, Fusion 360, and or Blender, and then export it as an STL file, and then from there you can print it out and play with it probably.
Yeah, and I think at least the printer that I use, I could probably import a OBJ almost directly. I think it'll import OBJs directly and allow you to just slice them. So it converts it kind of in the process to STL. Next question.
Ivan Gorgovich in San Diego, California. Is the T5 still the standard hard drive for recording media from a camera, or has another drive succeeded it?
Go ahead, Jesse.
It is not the standard because it's not being manufactured anymore. However, the heir apparent has not revealed itself yet. The camera ops I work with have been experimenting with all kinds of different SSDs, and nobody has settled on the one correct solution. We use T7s. They've functioned for our needs so far most of the time.
Yeah, most of the time is the problem with the T7s. So the T7s have a different caching system, which has been proven to be really difficult to be. It's a little unstable with Blackmagic cameras at higher bit rates. So that's why we've been avoiding those. I'm still using T5s a lot, but also I build my own from NVMEs. You can buy the cases, buy the NVMEs or SSDs and the M2s and put them together yourself. And that's what I use probably more than anything else. Go ahead, Mickey.
With majority of the circles and productions that I work on, the standard for recording media would be the native media that the camera takes, which is nowadays typically CFast or CF Express. At a certain level, some people wouldn't trust a storage media that's connected via a cable that has a non-locking connector, such as USB-C. So I would recommend investing in media that is a bit more secure than a hard drive an SSD that is externally mounted.
Yeah, and I think that the place where I use I definitely have some CFast tools, and some of the different cameras have a variety of different internal recording. And I agree with Mickey, if I'm doing a really, like a film shoot, and we absolutely need to make sure that every take is captured, the CFast is the best way, especially when it's a shorter form. I think the things we get into trouble with is longer form content that needs to be recorded that just, buying a CFast becomes price prohibitive for, many cameras. And the speed at which we can take them off. So pulling all the CFast is different than pulling off the drive or attaching it. But I think that, but we use we're still using a lot of the T5s and building our own for the externals. But the other side of that is definitely the CFast. I agree. Next question.
Next one comes from Malton Christensen in New York City. Fascinating AI demo he has linked here, both impressive and alarming. The post link lacks details on how it was created. Is it for real? And it could have significant implications, Alton notes, for the media industry if it's genuine.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, if this particular one isn't real, we're very, very close. All of the large language models do great on translation. ChatGPT speaks 20 different languages. And then DID is probably the best out of Israel for facial animation. They can match those lips perfectly. So yes, AI is taking over the world. Get prepared.
Good, Jeff. Go ahead, Jeff.
And that's all I would add is if this is in fact real. I mean, first of all, to be clear, I didn't see any mention of anything happening live. So in other words, you upload your original recording and then looks like the guy that posted this, it took about 10 minutes or so to get back each version. And exactly to John's point, each of the individual things that's happening is absolutely already being done by several companies. We've got the eye contact matching, where if you're not looking at the camera, we can change your eyes to make it look like you're looking. We can certainly do the language translation and generate the speech. The lip movement, I mean, that's, I need to see someone else or try it myself, because the lip movement sure looks precise. And not only that, but the facial and jaw movement that goes along with it all seems to be perfectly aligned with each language version. So I'm skeptical, but again, it's all doable and certainly plausible.
It's all doable. I don't know if that software is publicly available, but I can tell you that that's already been built, for a little while now. And so they're rolling it out slowly. We're seeing it in the back end. We're seeing it pop up here and there they're using it for fixes. So someone's, especially moving, ratcheting down a rating for a film from R to PG or PG-13, and taking out the swear words and replacing them. We used to just kind of dub over those, and now they're remapping the mouth for that. And so those are the kind of things that are happening, and they're happening. The rate is increasing as far as that goes, and I think that it is. We just have to really realize we're entering an age where you're not going to be able to truly believe anything that you see. You shouldn't use video or stills to say, well, I saw it. That's not going to really mean a lot. And so you have to see it from multiple sources that don't generally agree with each other. Like that's you're going to have, it's an adversarial information model, which is that you have to know both sides agree that it happened. And if they don't, you're going to have to start thinking about whether it's believable or not. Go ahead, Chris.
I used to edit airplane versions of movies. It was a horribly unsatisfying job.
Next question.
Ivan Gorgovich in San Diego again. iPhone 15 Pro Max. What hard drive will you use to record log files to?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So there's still a lot of information we don't know about the USB-C and what it can do, what can't do. It's 10 gigabytes for the Max models. The first iPhone is still going to be USB 2.0, by the way. So keep that in mind. And but pretty much any type of hard drive that can support that is going to be part of that. And of course, what works best? We use an ATEM Mini, and certain drives work, certain drives don't. So there's going to be a lot of testing that's going to happen in the next couple months. So we'll find out then.
Go ahead, Bill.
My presumption is going to be one of the best will be the NVMe drives that you can easily get from many companies that have a USB-C connector, Thunderbolt, if it's provisioned like that, and are very fast. And the good thing is that you can upgrade your memory on them as things get bigger. This is going to be exciting. We'll be able to shoot longer form stuff on phones and things.
Sorry, Chris.
I was going to in now. I believe the Max, Jeffrey, will not be USB 2. I think it's USB 3 or better. And I just imagine, are we going to have daily driver phone cages that have a little slot for your T5 drive on the back?
100%. Go ahead, Courtney.
I haven't tried it yet, but these Lex they only come in 1 terabyte so far, I think. They're in VMEs, and they're blazingly fast. I think they're at least 5 megabytes per second transfer rate, and I've tested them at 2200 for recording. So they do work very fast. They're fairly low current too, and tiny small. If they get rid of this carabiner thing, it'd be a lot even smaller.
Yeah, a lot of us have now. For my phones, I have the small rig. I just get it now with the camera, which is the small rig, basically camera frame that has all the mounts on the outside. And so once you have that, then you can just get the drive mount for it. And it's I think it's going to be really useful. Next question.
Next question comes from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Any thoughts on what Logitech just released and unabashedly calls the most flexible show and tell camera? 2-in-1 full HD webcam and overhead camera for creators, gamers, educators, and professionals. And there's a link.
Jesse?
Boy, howdy, does this look cheaply built. The way the device starts and stops on a dime, it looks very jerky. I would go with a Rode boom arm before I put this on my desk.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
It's going to be perfect for anybody that's getting into doing stuff like this. Doesn't need to have the production value. The camera itself is 1080p and 2.0 in its f-stop. So I think it's 3.7 millimeter lens, I believe, if I read that correct. So it's a standard Logitech webcam that's going to be on a stick. So if you don't need that high end quality, then it's going to be perfect for you.
Jeff?
Yeah, and I think most of their product line, really is targeting the relatively basic individual YouTuber or teacher or someone that has for a long time had lots of things on a table that they want to show, lots of videos about crafts or anything. And, people have done a variety of rigs to try and get some kind of camera. So I think this is great for those folks. I didn't see a price, but assuming it's in kind with other webcams and things like that, I think it's a great product for those folks. It just gives them exactly what they need. They don't need a whole frame around their entire room.
Go, Bill.
As soon as I saw that, I said goodbye to overhead projector in classrooms. If it's inexpensive enough for cash-strapped elementary schools, there may be a lot of those out here.
Yeah, I think it for companies who are, or individuals, YouTubers, et cetera, there's a lot of things that they're not ready to do high end. And this is reproducing something that we've, these kind of art or artboard cameras are something you can see much bigger versions of this on Amazon or B&H and many other places that give you a lot of control. You can put big cameras on it and move them around. I think that for a small desktop, I want to do exactly what's been said before. I think it works great. And probably for a lot of us, we'd want a couple more tools. It looks like it's using the Logi, the little webcam that they had, and then just simply adding arms and stuff to it. But I could definitely see how a teacher, someone doing quick live streams to Instagram or to YouTube or others would find this super useful. Next question.
Jesse Kester in Glendale, California. Blackmagic has a stream tomorrow morning. Any predictions or wish list items?
John?
So they actually tell us cameras, post-production, and broadcast. Camera, I think they're going to come out with an 8K boxy type camera to compete with the Sony Burano, sorry. Post-production is going to be probably some new DaVinci, maybe 19. And broadcast is going to be an 8K switcher with 2110 built in.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I wish they'd come out with a ATEM Mini that has USB camera host inputs on it. That would be really cool.
They took over my page. Go ahead, Jesse.
A little more room for growth between HDMI and SDI would be nice in their camera line.
Mitchell?
Fix the UVC conflict on USB so we don't get the ATEM gray.
And it does look like the Burano is quite something to look at. I think I'm just looking at Petapixel right now, 8.6K full frame sensor. So that's with 16 stops of dynamic range. Let's see it's a little boxy camera with a big sensor. So so it's $25,000 starting to ship on September. It's pre-order for September 13th, which is today, and the camera is expected to ship spring of 2024.
But does it have USB out so you can use it as a webcam?
Exactly. It'll be interesting to see. I think that for Blackmagic, I think we're going to see a lot. The cameras are probably. I don't think that there's going to be a camera released without an Ethernet cable from now on. So I think that that's the thing that we'll probably watch for. They'll probably start adding that to everything. Next question.
Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota. Do you folks run static IPs on your setup or just use DHCP reservations on your setups? And if both, when do you run static and why?
Good, Mitchell.
Just a good idea to always have static. It just means you planned your network and you're also planning for conflicts down the road. If you're doing DHCP, even if you have routing tables, there's going to be a problem where you're going to be bumping into something or something will mysteriously shut down. So play it safe. Static is the best way to go.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I build my networks with DHCP enabled on the clients, but I do, as Tommy mentioned, set reserved IP addresses so that as hardware moves from one location to another, like between my network, my studio, or another studio, they're able to grab an IP address that I know and am expecting that the hardware to be in. And if ever the DHCP server does go out, they are able to assign themselves an IP address in the 192.256. 168.256 subnet.
Yeah, we also do the same thing with Meraki's. So what we do is it's all attached to the MAC addresses that are there that are connected to those machines. Every Meraki will have it in the kits that we built in the past in Pixel Core. If you put any given machine in, the Meraki would know what to give it to via DHCP. So all the clients were set to DHCP. I will say that you have to know what you're doing if you're doing what Mickey and I are talking about. But we would schedule all of those so that if you just dropped an encoder in, it was always the same it was always the same host address, but the network address would change based on the location that it was at. And so that way, you just tell me what kit you're in, and I knew exactly how to get to the encoder, the switcher, the mixer, whatever we needed to do to make that happen without a lot of. I didn't need to know any. You didn't have to tell me any IPs. Now, oftentimes we had what that number is. Oftentimes, just the end of that host number printed somewhere on the front of the of the box, so that we just knew what it needed to be. You do have to be very careful if you're going to mix and match static and DHCP, because that's when they really start running over each other. So when we built the DHCPs, we would leave a gap open of addresses that could be used by static. So if we're adding something, we knew that we could add it into that, maybe 50 addresses that we could add in there that we know is safe. The DHCP is not trying to use it, so we would keep it outside of that. Go ahead, John.
Exactly right. On a /24 network, my first 100 are static, and the remainder 150, 140-ish are DHCPs.
And when we say /128, that's a 255, 255, 128. That means that half of that third octet is being delivered back to your address, to the local addresses, to the host addresses. Next question.
Jacques Lementreau in New Orleans, Louisiana says, still looking to find what's the best speaker and amp setup with balanced wiring for playing guitar and bass on stage. Doesn't need a powered PA, just wants a combo to play on stage that's balanced. The recommended Fractal AxeFX-3 can't drive a cabinet by itself.
Good, Jeffrey.
Yeah, that is definitely true. So I actually talked to my bandmates about this, and the one thing that kept coming up was the Fender Bassman as an all-around. But if you're going to switch from guitar to bass, you're definitely going to need something like a Fractal in between, so you can make those simple changes with one switch, so you can make it sound good. You could play a bass in a guitar amp; it's not a problem, but there are going to be frequencies that are out from there. Otherwise, there's a lot of different hybrids. Black Feather makes one, Orange makes one, Ampeg makes them, and all of those heads are really good to have. And then, of course, you can then mix and match on your speakers to what your sound is and how much you need. If you need a small speaker, if you need a large speaker.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on what the Jacques means about balanced wiring. But one thing I would say is that different amps and cabinet combos have very distinct sounds to them. Like a Marshall sounds different from a Vox, different to a Marshall, I don't know, I'm not a guitar person, but twin reverb or whatever they call it. It also sounds different from an Orange combo. I would suggest... It seems like you're in north of Los Angeles. I don't know if there's like a guitar center nearby. If you want to drop by and test a bunch of their amps there and their cabinets and see which one fits for the specific sound that you're going for, because they all sound different. Also, perhaps in YouTube, check out channels like Rig Rundown, and also Sweetwater has a lot of amp-related content as well. So pick one. I think only you can decide for yourself which amp combo would work for you.
Good, Chris.
From my Pacific Rim friend, NOLA means New Orleans. I would try the Pod 6 guitar amp gizmo. You get great sounds out of it. I believe the rack one has balanced out. You can hook it up to any cabinet you want, and you can get line outs to the front of house mix.
Next
I've used
question.
it quite successfully.
Oh, and a quick reminder, by the way, that of course you can ask questions throughout the first hour. We're going to talk about our specifically, not general Ambisonic, but specifically our Ambisonic pipeline that we're using, for events. And we'll be talking about that in the second hour. So if you've got questions about that, go ahead and throw those in. But of course, you can ask general questions in the first hour, and you can use this little QR code or just the URL askofficehours.com to throw your questions in. You won't have to log in. You also don't get to vote and chat and all these other things that you might want to do, but you do get to just ask the question really quickly. So go ahead and throw it in there. Make sure to vote on the questions. We've got a lot of questions this morning, so make sure to vote on those questions, and we'll get to them as fast as we can. Next question.
Jesse Kester in Glendale, California again. Unity client logs out when I switch the computer from Wi-Fi to Ethernet. My other always-on web apps remain logged in. What makes Unity so special?
Go ahead, Mickey.
So yeah, I think I would consider it a warning that if you've been logged out, that something has gone wrong. If say you have Ethernet as top priority in if you're on a Macintosh, you can set the priorities of your different network connections. And say if Ethernet is your priority and for some reason it fails over to Wi-Fi, Unity logging out would be a good sign for me. Like a lot of people take advantage of the fact that a lot of the ATEM switchers have Terranex converters on their inputs. I, for one, do not like that because I want to know if I'm sending the switcher the incorrect signal. I think of it that way with Unity. If it logs out, I don't want it to connect automatically because I want to know if something has gone wrong with my network. Saying that, though, within Unity intercom settings, there is a selection called continuous login, which will repeatedly try to re-log in the client if the internet connection goes away.
Go, Jeff.
And I'm not sure, by the way, I mean, unless you have the client up on your screen that you would know it's logged out or that there's a problem, right? You're assuming you're connected, you're not looking at it, and I'm not sure that you would know. But I've found the desktop version way more temperamental than the mobile app. So what I did for a long time is actually ran the app on my iPhone and then just routed the audio in to my computer's audio, so I was still getting it in my headphones and not going out. And I've found it to be a little bit more forgiving with problems than the desktop version.
Yeah, my biggest complaint with Unity is actually that it logs you out and it doesn't warn you. Like, we have a lot of people that get logged out, they just aren't responding, and then we find out that we get used to texting people if we ping them on Unity and they don't. It's not very good at warning us. It's supposed to have some little beep, but it doesn't work 90% of the time. Next question.
Matt Halverson in Brookings, South Dakota says, when I put a 2997 frames per second clip on a 23.97 frames per second timeline in Premiere, should I be changing the frame rate manually by going to modify clip, assume this frame rate, or does Premiere do a good job with the automatic conversion?
Go, Jesse.
Compared to Resolve, Premiere does a good job with the automatic conversion. That said, if you are shooting a B-roll, if there's no audio that you're using from the footage, I would go ahead and convert the footage to 2397. If you have people talking, if there's sync sound, you should leave it at 2997 because 20% change in clip speed will absolutely be noticeable in their voices.
Good. Mitchell?
Yeah, that's true. And Matt, you're probably referring to 2398 to hit that 24 number. As a matter of practice, at best practice, I generally right-click modify to have it match. But Premiere does do a pretty good job of doing it best it can to match up with it. The only time I run into real problems with Premiere is if you try to drop a 44.1 audio clip onto a timeline. It really doesn't like it. It starts doing weird things. So best to stick with 48 on audio.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, say if it's just a single clip that has to be, say, a 29976 clip being brought into a 2398 timeline, I'd first run that through compressor or Adobe Media Encoder and transcode that clip prior to bring that clip into the NLE. That way, even before bringing it in, I can already take a look. Will frame blending work well with this? Will optical flow be necessary for the type of motion that's in that video? But yeah, I would get everything conformed to the base, to the time base before bringing it in, if it's only one clip.
Go ahead, Chris.
I will concur that as an editor, I like slowing down B-roll a little bit, the 20% that Jesse mentioned. It just has a nice little feel to it.
I conform all my clips before I bring them into the editor. I never let the editor make any adjustments at all. If I'm going to do a 2398 thing, I convert everything to 2398 before I go in, or 2997. I do that all that process before, and it takes a little bit of time at the front end, but there are so many wonky things that happen through the edit process. I have everything is Apple ProRes, typically whatever I'm going to deliver in. So it's usually HQ is usually where the kind of the in between. But I conform everything to exactly the same format all the way through, all the time. And I can tell you when we haven't done that, when I've allowed it to be some other way, or I haven't done it that way, I paid the price almost 100% of the time. That it's a slower render, it's a slower update. We get crashes on the render, not that I'm bitter, and all kinds of other things that may work in the timeline. But we've had issues where we bring MP4s in, they work in the timeline, and then they crash the render on the way out. These are all things that that doesn't happen when you conform. Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, totally agree with what Alex said there. And in addition to that, if you are collaborating with other houses, or like if you have to send your timeline to VFX, if you have to send your timeline to color, to sound, having mixed frame rates just adds more work and headache down the line. And again, with those complications that Alex mentioned. So if only a small subset of your clips are in a different frame rate from the time base, conform them first.
Go ahead, Courtney.
One thing you didn't mention is whether it's a broadcast clip at 2997, which could contain interlace footage in it, in which case you'd want to perform a de-interlace or an inverse telecine to get it back to an original 24 if it's a theatrical feature that's been a clip, let's say, from a theatrical feature that you pulled off a DVD or something. It'll be interlaced, so you want to de-interlace it before you move it into a progressive 2397 timeline.
And the best way to de-interlace it is to run it through. I mean, you want to run it through something that has a good scaler, and a lot of times we will pass an interlace through a Teranex and then out. May seem like an extra job, but unless it depends on how your encoder or your compressor is going to handle it. The proper way to handle it now is to throw one field away and scale the other field. So if you see any kind of roughness along the edges of a de-interlace conversion, it means that they're trying to interpolate those to get all they can, quote unquote, out. But the reality is that a big company in the South Bay realized that it was actually, they had gotten to the point where their scaler was better than the de-interlacer, and you could just throw one field away and then scale the other field up. That's the proper way to do it. And so if you see any kind of jagged edges on a de-interlace, it might look a little softer than you would expect from 1080p, let's say, but you don't want to see any jaggies at all. Like anything rough on it means that they're not scaling it properly, and you should never use that. Whatever that is that you're using conversion, don't use that again. Next question.
Georgie Bortnick in Swissvale, New Hampshire says, how do we find and get the perpetual license for the StreamDeck on mobile for iPad and phone that Jeffrey was promoting the other day? I don't see the option for the paid upgrade in the store.
Go, Jeffrey.
I'm glad you asked that question again. I was watching yesterday and I was like, FOMO for not being on the show to be able to answer the question. So basically what it is if you have an iPhone, if you have an iPad, you can download the 2.0 version of StreamDeck. If you have an earlier phone or iPad that cannot download 2.0, you won't be able to get this. But then once you do, all you have to do is go in and it's going to say, do you want to do monthly? Do you want to do yearly? It should have the lifetime. We checked yesterday and I looked on the App Store. It's still promoted as a lifetime. So if you do not see that there, I would highly suggest contacting Elgato and ask them, how do I get the lifetime from there? But it's been a great little thing. You can do up to 80 buttons on this thing. It's just amazing. There are some connection issues every now and then. And of course, if you have an Android, you can't get that just yet because they haven't updated it to the 2.0 software.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand. Yeah, I know Alex loves URLs in advance, but thoughts about this and people that know about Kutiman, Kutiman, and what he does. Can we get him on office hours and a link there?
We would need more time. I kind of skipped through this video and I didn't really know what I was looking at. so anyway, give us more time. Maybe post this again much earlier than the show or before the show, so we get a little time to actually watch the video. But skipping through it, I didn't didn't know what to do with that. Next question.
Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware. Sony has a new CineAlta camera called the Burano, full frame 8K that sits between the FX9 and the Venice cameras. Perhaps we'll see more at IBC, and he's got a link there.
Go ahead, Jesse.
It's rolling shutter. Is global shutter dead now?
Nope. Just harder. Mitchell.
Yeah, I wish it did have the global shutter, but for the most part, it's a camera that you can use for $25,000 that can cut against the Venice 2, which is a $100,000 plus camera. Looks very interesting, and I'm very curious what Sony has in mind. They seem to be expanding the low end and the upper end of their product line right now, and doing a good job of it.
Every I think in Sony, it's every job has a different camera. You get a camera. You get a camera. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, body-wise, it seems like it's very, very similar in form factor to the FX9. From the sound side of things, it seems like we have lost, compared to the Venice and the Venice 2, it seems like we have lost a 5-pin XLR and also the AES input. So I guess that's understandable with the slightly smaller form factor. But I'm glad that Sony is still using standard connectors for both. For audio, for Genlock, and for timecode. ARRI has gone away from standard connectors in that realm, and also, well, Red forever has always, hey, new camera, new connector, spend hundreds of dollars on new cables.
Well, and if you're doing dual sound, I think it's oftentimes we're just putting audio. I mean, for those types of cameras, we're oftentimes doing dual sound. I very rarely depend on a camera to give me show audio. So I think I think for me, when I look at those cameras, I need to have some way to input audio into it for reference. But do you use the audio recorded to the camera very often, Mickey?
There are some productions that would like to have the guide track embedded into the camera recording itself. But for a small form factor like this, I could see a lot of even ENG productions using this camera because of the smaller form factor. And those definitely want a mixed track on the camera, and timecode, of course, is essential as well.
I guess my question is for a small form factor, I'm very curious about where this camera fits into the pipeline, because I use a fair number. We use Venices for a fair number of things that I work on. But for me, there's like the Venice, and then if I start going, and Venice 2 specifically, but if I start going down below that, I immediately just drop to the FX6. Like it's just FX6, FR7, and the stuff in between. I'm not, I don't know. I guess I'm very curious as to what, given that the Creator, which is coming out at the end of September, was all shot on an FX3. It's an interesting puzzle as to where this camera fits into that model between the two. It'll be interesting to see how successful it is. Go ahead, Courtney.
And look at the lens mount. I think it takes PL lenses, doesn't it? Professional Cine lenses.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think they're aiming this at the documentary film market, the people that used to shoot on 16 millimeter or handheld 35 millimeter. For the handheld market for shooting docs, it's a little more easy to manage and less having to build out of Venice into a documentary package that weighs a lot, that has 17,000 things glommed onto the side of it.
I know. If I was going to shoot a documentary, though, I still feel like I would shoot it with an FX6. If I was shooting a documentary with a Sony, I feel like I'd still be doing an FX6. Just much more. It's a smaller form factor, easier to manage. For the price, you have a second or third camera as well. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
I agree with Courtney. By the way, to answer your question, PL and E mount, which is interesting, must have some kind of a mechanism to allow that, sort of like the Venice does. And the other thing is, as a documentary camera, I agree. I think it's a great fit. And the form factor, Alex, if you put a FX6 9 and a Venice next to each other, the 6 and the 9 and the new burrito, as John calls it, would fit right in there. So. Yeah, it's stuck with that name forever. The other thing is it has a scratch mic next to where the camera operator has their mouth, so that'll be handy.
Yeah, by the way, changing those lens mounts are not hard. With the Blackmagic cameras we have shims for shims and things. It takes about 10 minutes to change from one mount to the other. Go ahead, Mickey.
I have to agree with the documentary use case of it. Because like if you think about it, if you look at the price point, if you spread out, because documentaries typically shoot for long periods of time. I've shot documentaries that have been shot over the course of 5 years, and if you a lot of documentaries tend to just outright buy the camera instead of rent it. When you amortize that over 5 years or however many years you expect this asset to be useful, then that difference in price of $10,000 or 20, I don't know how much the FX6 is pretty much negligible. And if you do use it on a rental basis, it's a couple $100 US difference. So it's not that big a deal in the grand scheme of things.
And a quick reminder that, of course, you can ask questions throughout it. You can use the QR code that we'll post here in just a second, or you can also just go ahead into Mukana and ask your questions. First hour is general discussion, and second hour is this Ambisonic pipeline that we're working on within events. And so we'll talk about that a little bit with Mickey here in a couple minutes. So if you have questions of either one of those, go ahead and throw those in. And of course, remember to vote on the questions. Your vote matters. It tells us when you want us to answer them. So go ahead and throw those in right now. And let's go to the next question.
Next one comes to us from Jeff Cohen in Miami Beach, Florida. What else will you do with the new iPhone 15 virtual silent button on the side?
Jesse?
I'm assuming this is about the action button. It's going to be a shutter button.
Jeff?
Yeah, I put this in here because, believe it or not, I'm thrilled about this. That last physical button that was essentially the mute, turn off ringers and alerts and things like that, was that last physical button that I could not script. I could not automate it. And now I can. So even if I just stick to that function, it's great because, for instance, my on-air script that does a whole host of things on my computer and phone, all with one button, can now make sure that my phone is muted for alarms, alerts. I currently do that by changing focus modes and having that populate to the phone. But this is great. In addition to contextual things you'll be able to do with shortcut scripting, because that one button can fire off a shortcut or a script that can determine what you want it to do based on conditional logic and a whole host of, anything that shortcuts can do. It can talk to outside stuff. It can take a picture and automatically upload it. I mean, I'm ready to try a whole bunch of things. I can't wait.
Go ahead, Chris.
First of all, the volume button, Jesse, is already a shutter button. You can hit either one of the volume up or down and take a picture. So there's already that. I wonder if this change in the hardware would happen if Steve was still alive. I'd love to know the origin of the one button that is not electronic, that you just flick this thing, because I have a feeling that was probably like, Steve Jobs, like being completely, ballistic when somebody's phone would make noise in a meeting, saying there's got to be a way to turn it off immediately without getting into any menus. I find it strange. I just wonder, would that happen? That being said, the fact that it can be customized, it's super interesting. But, we already have other customizable things. Like does anybody use the thing where if you tap the back of your phone a couple of times, that it'll initiate something? I don't know how much people really take advantage of some of those deeper features. It'll be interesting to see how it gets used.
Too many false positives on that, by the way, but that's why.
Go ahead, Bill.
Once upon a time, back in my, I think, late 30s, early 40s, I was so busy that I ended up carrying a micro recorder around with me, and I would do audio notes to myself all day long, so I literally didn't have time to find a pen to do that. I'm tempted, in seeing the presentation yesterday, to come up with a shortcut that'll allow me to take a voice memo and specifically log it into a to be transcribed or to be thought about later thing, to just go back to that. I used to really enjoy that because I could just toss off a note and go on in the middle of a shoot or anywhere else. So I may try that, try to bring back an oldie but goodie for me.
Go ahead, Courtney. Or Jeff, I'm sorry, Jeff.
By the way, that is already doable, not with that button, but that shortcut can be created. I can help you with that, by the way, if you want. And there's actually even a native record audio function, and then you can script what you want to do to it. I should also make clear, all of these things are doable by Siri command, for example. You don't even have to go into any menus. You can fire any of these shortcuts off now, and I have a whole host of them that I fire off with saying, Siri command. So to Chris's point, the difference is this is a button that you could use perhaps during a meeting or somewhere where you don't want to be barking out commands to your phone. Why, by the way, is not to cater to my bizarre scripting obsession. It's simply a physical button is a point of failure, hardware failure. It breaks, dust gets in it. It's not as easy to waterproof it. So making it a virtual button, that's, I'm sure, is the primary goal.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, if I had it to program, I'd program it that if you hold it down for 3 seconds, it would open a little motorized door on the bottom, revealing the concealed headphone jack.
It's still in there. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. The non-US models of the iPhone 15 support both nanoSIMs and eSIMs. Considering the convenience of eSIMs, why is Apple holding on to nanoSIMs?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I don't think it's Apple's choice to hold on to nanoSIMs because there's a lot of advantages to having an eSIM over a nanoSIM. The first thing is that you don't have to reserve that specific spot for a nanoSIM, so you can put it anywhere in the phone. An eSIM, the iPhone 15 apparently can connect up to 8 eSIMs into the phone. That's the rumor. So you could put that anywhere in the phone. You could close up the phone so it's even more waterproof, watertight, and be able to control it from there. I really think it's just the carriers and what their technologies are inside, because the countries UK, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Netherlands, Sweden, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, China, Singapore, Turkey are the ones that are you can get the nanoSIM on, and they're highly recommending if you travel to those companies, you should buy your phone in those countries so you can get the nanoSIM. But other than that, you might not need it at all. And I have a feeling in the next couple of years, the nanoSIM will be a thing in the past. It's also not an environmentally friendly thing to have a nanoSIM inside the phone. And of course, I'll leave the rest of that to Octavia Spencer.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I'd say only a very, very small subset of the countries globally, and even portions of countries globally, have support for eSIMs. So nano-SIMs are still very important, or physical SIM cards. And I personally prefer physical SIM cards because if I want to switch my carrier over to a different phone, I don't have to configure anything, or worst case, I don't have to call the carrier, which I hate. So I like physical SIMs.
I strongly prefer physical SIMs. so for the same reasons, when I'm traveling, I don't want to have to deal with taking away the SIMs takes away the user's mobility. Next question.
Jeffrey Reyes in Bronx, New York, for Wacom style pens. Wacom, is Wacom.
It's Wacom like water. We did talk to Wacom about it, yes, and got it from Wacom.
Style. So for their stylus pen, what do you guys feel is the best way to hold it? Between which fingers is the pen gripped, and which finger do you use for the buttons? Oh my God, religious question.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Dare I venture into this, and I've been saying it wrong this whole time. I love the question, by the way. This is a Wacom. How's it? Okay.
Wacom.
This
like
is
you're walking to the store.
This is a stylus you can use with any phone, tablet. This particular one is great. It's a very nice pen and a stylus that works great on any touch surface. Very accurate, though. But it's always been my belief how you hold it has got to be how you write. I mean, you're going to be the most precise with that. So, that's mine, but I'm shocked. Sometimes, I see people that do this thing where it's like 3, if not 4 fingers on the stylus or pen, and they're extremely accurate with that. I can never do that. And of course, it's got to be the thumb for the buttons.
Good, Bill.
The woman with the best penmanship I have ever known was in high school, and she held her writing implement between her second and third finger, and I was always astonished at, but she had unbelievable control of the nib of her pen doing it that way. I thought about changing for about 5 minutes. I said, no, I'm never going to switch.
Jeffrey?
So with Wacom, and I think of it as Fozzie Bear, Wacom. Anyway, so it's I always hated the
Where's
buttons.
that commercial? They should use that in the commercial. Like
Totally. Get Fozzie out.
Wacom. Anyway, so I always hated the buttons because they always got in the way. I always turned them off and then used a keyboard command for that. My brother actually writes. He taught himself left hand, and the whole story on that I won't get into. But when he writes, his pen is got more of a like a 15 to 20 degree angle to it. So when he drew on Wacom tablets, he also disabled the buttons because they always got in the way. I write, I use it as a regular pen, except my pinky's always down on the corner like this most of the time, or else I was overhead. Granted, I haven't used a Wacom in a couple of years, but that's how I normally used it. So it's really how your writing style that really influences how you use the tablet.
I just use it as a pencil. The only thing I do is I index for the button. I'm using the Wacom One, which only has one button, and I find the index is easier. If I put it on my thumb, I find that I accidentally hit it. But sometimes when I'm angry, I just pissed. All right, next question.
Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas is up next. Was there a $200 to $300 Sony camera with autofocus?
Go, Jesse.
At that price range, you are looking at handy cams, like little tiny camcorders. The ZV-1F is $500, and I think that might be more what you're talking about than a handy cam.
Go, Jeffrey.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, handy cam. Unless you want to really go for the questionable eBays, the broken Sonys, and build your own little Frankenstein, you're not going to get anything under $500.
Mickey?
I'd say take a look at the secondhand market for cameras from the A6000 line, A6000, A6100, A6300. There's a good number of pretty affordable Sonys there with autofocus. Also, search for Santa Greg, who's been on the show in the past. He has built a nice collection of secondhand Sony cameras from the A6000 line, and it's working out for him.
Next question.
Next question comes from Jason Robertshaw in Sarasota, Florida. Is there a Mac software that will mirror flip a small monitor for use in a teleprompter? Rotate is already in the system settings, but how do I flip so that left is right and so forth?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Most teleprompter software should have the ability to, and I know Chris Fenwick hates the word should, most teleprompter software has the ability to flip, do a horizontal flip on its output, either on its primary window output or its secondary display output.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, right. What Mickey says, that you can flip one of the outputs on most of the Mac software out there. Magic Scroll, I think, on the Mac does it. And but one thing to consider is, having done a lot of teleprompting stuff, if you're in a situation where you're going to multiple monitors, you want to be able to do it on each individual monitor.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, and I would add that had you been able to do this natively in system settings, fine. I would, if you can get by with just having software that'll do it, I would opt for that versus having to put in some system level software that's going to flip your video. You're just introducing extra risk into your video chain. I wish I knew who recommended. I know, I think Alex did, and a couple others have recommended this great teleprompter software for the Mac. It's called Teleprompter. It's joellenpro.com. It's from the Mac App Store. It's got, I think, every feature you could possibly need, including it can flip, as Mickey said, not just, it can flip everything or just a designated monitor. It's a great app and reasonably priced.
Next question.
Next one comes from Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota. Who's getting a new iPhone?
I am. It's my job. I guess Bill and John and Jesse all raised their hand, but on Mac break, I pretty much have to have a new one. So I'll be on at 5:00 on Friday. I'll be hitting the button really fast. Next question.
Next question comes from Chester Sweeney again in Las Vegas, Nevada. Has anybody used or tried the DAW Nano Studio 2? It seems pretty loaded, but hasn't seemed to change much.
It looks like a really interesting software. I really am not as familiar with it. I looked at it in Nano Studios. I think the real challenge on an iPad-only DAW is really having it distinguish itself from GarageBand. I think it's a really hard market to move into in the iPad because GarageBand's already there and Logic's already there, and they're not very expensive. Logic, of course, has a $5 a month. GarageBand is free. So I think that market could be really difficult if you're doing kind of this mobile-first DAW, but it looks like a pretty interesting one. You may like the interface; it's a little cleaner, trying to be a little less shiny. But I don't know what features it would have that would cleanly distinguish it. Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand. Given floods, earthquakes, and so forth happening regularly now, what disaster recovery strategies are our panelists and communities considering?
I know for myself, it is really paying attention to just general good old-fashioned backups. It's a 3-2-1, three copies of everything, in two different locations and one in the cloud. And so that 3-2-1 is, for data, that's where I'm looking at. Of course, having good insurance. We worry a lot about fires where I live, so those are the things to think about there. But that's something to kind of consider. Go ahead, Courtney.
Live in a flat but elevated area. Then you don't have to worry too much about fires sweeping through the hills, which is a big danger here in California, and floods because you're on a little higher plane. But if you are in a floodplain or on a hilltop or a hillside, investigate fire insurance and flood insurance, because that's the best way to cover yourself in event of a catastrophe like that. You may find yourself and also take your really valuable paperwork and make duplicates of them and place them off site in somebody else's house or in a bank vault somewhere, so that you don't lose all your important paperwork that proves you own your car or your house, etc.
Next, go ahead. I'm sorry, Bill.
Obviously, with what we've seen lately, there are disasters from which you can recover and those which you cannot. You should pay as much attention as you think is good for the recoverable ones. If the dam breaks and you're in the floodplain, there's not much prep that will do anything for you. And that's just part of the reality of the world. That's not to say you shouldn't take time. You should back up and do the rest of these things. But I always look at what's in the margin, things that I can control versus things that I don't. And I try to spend little time on the things I can't.
Go ahead, Chris.
Our friend Keenan, one of his proposed data stream or money streams is a website that he is building called the Level-Headed Prepper. And it's a great idea because, we've all heard of the semi-crazy, living, mountaintop living, with their own water source and everything. But there's a lot of things that you can do at a very easy entry-level thing. And I will say, keep an eye out for that, because this is all part of what he's trying to do. He's trying to give people roadmaps to being like, I know I'm not ready for things to go wrong, but I want to be a little ready. I want to be more ready. I want to be very ready. And he's trying to build like a roadmap to how to get to the point where you're ready for any kind of disaster.
Go, Jeff.
And I think there's a big distinction to make, which is disaster prevention versus what the question is, which is disaster recovery. As someone who lives in Miami Beach, it is a given that disasters will happen. To some extent, they happen every summer, every season. So we have to always be prepared, knowing that at any given day, within a few days' notice, we could be in a situation where, at a minimum, we're out of power. So the biggest advice I would say is just plan, assuming that something will happen, and just map out your steps.
Coming up next for the second hour, we have we're going to have to talk about Ambisonic. Tomorrow we've got Calvin Roberts, an old friend of mine, that's going to be here. He has done everything in this video industry, so it's going to be great to walk through his how he got to where he is and what he does and what he sees going forward. Friday, of course, solving network challenges, and that's going to be a great way for you to figure that out. But we have IBC coming up, and we're going to give you a little promo right now.
European members of the Office Hours community are heading to the International Broadcast Convention in the Rai Center in Amsterdam to bring you the latest broadcast trends and technologies to Office Hours live from the exhibition floor. Join us on the 16th of September for the latest trends in broadcasting technologies, and this year we are especially focusing on finding solutions for your production problems. Let us know what you would like to see, what problems you need to be solved, over on officehours.global/IBC.
Welcome to the second hour, and we're going to be talking about Ambisonic, and specifically we're going to talk about Ambisonic as it relates to what we're doing with our IBC coverage, or not IBC, but NAB coverage and other coverage that we're doing here in the U.S. We hope to make it something that's international, but we're kind of moving through that very slowly and kind of building that up. And so we want to talk a little bit about how that works and answer your questions about it. And here's a lot of why we want to do that is that I think that it adds a lot to the flavor. So when I sit here and watch an NFL football game or something, and I'm getting 5-1 over YouTube, and you can hear the crowd around you, and you can hear things that are popping up and down, it's a really kind of a great feel, and you feel like they're there. I actually, looking at the coverage that we did at NAB, which is up on our site, if you go back and skip the first half hour, Kevin and I did something that turned that upside down. But if you go into the second half hour, you'll start to hear the conference around you. And I think that we're going to keep on refining this. So I'm going to show you what we're doing. We've gone over it a little bit in the past with the NAB coverage, but I really wanted to step through it so you really understand what we're doing here, because I think it's going to end up being revolutionary. And I think we're going to end up using every version of coverage that we do over time, because it's not that it's hard in the sense that it takes some thinking, but it's not that hard. In the past, we think of surround and 5.1 as something we really have to do a really complicated pipeline, and we're really trying to simplify that pipeline and make it something that, at least on the edge, when we're out there, that we can do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a little bit about some of the testing, show you a little bit of what we're dealing with in the field, and then talk about the pipeline a little bit, and then I'm going to hand it off to Mickey, and we actually have a little simulation to show you. So we've set up an Ambisonic mic in down at the 090 offices, so that you can kind of see how the software works a little bit. So we'll give you kind of those things as you see this. Raise your hand, ask questions about it. I think, again, the concept of being able to do it, and you're going to see us start to move. We're going to start testing a lot of this. Not this week because of IBC, but the following week, we're going to start doing the Saturdays in 5.1 and potentially in HDR as well. It may not look perfect. It may not sound perfect, but we've decided that we just have to go ahead and push forward. So, and Saturdays are going to be kind of a test day for us to do that. So you'll see us asking questions, doing lots of testing in a lot of different areas. And this is going to be one of the areas that we test in. So let me show you kind of how it begins and how we tend to do it. What the challenge is, we have to do it remotely. We're on a live view, and we have to get this. We have to get the pipeline so that we can have a relatively small rig in the field that is sending back the material that we need. So how we kind of got it tested here, this is kind of a basic rig of me, fiddling with this rig. Here's the key here is that here's our Ambisonic mic here. Now, the thing is that we're doing something different. Most people who talk about Ambisonic, especially in a small field, they think they're just going to use the Ambisonic mic and then everyone's going to talk and everything else, but you're too far away from it and everything just gets blended into the background. So we've got two handheld mics, and this is all wired right now because that's how we test it. Two handheld mics here, and those are going into Scorpio. I think we could probably, the Scorpio is important because in the field, so this does make it a little bit more expensive. And Nikki, you can correct me. I don't know how many other things I could use for a Scorpio that had enough outputs. So basically what happens here is that we've got the two mics that are going in, and then we've got the Ambisonic. The Ambisonic this is a first order Ambisonic. So this is a 4 mics, 4 inputs into this, and we're going to, in a couple of weeks, we're going to talk about Ambisonic in detail. But I wanted to kind of give you, it was a question about whether we do Ambisonic first and then this or this first, but I want to show why we're using it, and then we'll talk more about Ambisonic. But anyway, so we have these 4 inputs here. The big advantage to this is that I need to be able to embed all 6 channels back into an SDI signal to get back into the live view. So basically, what happens is that from this camera here, this goes into, and this is an audio embedder. This is a Blackmagic audio embedder, and this goes in. Now, to get that many channels, I only have 4 inputs into the embedder. I have to use AES, and to do that, out of the left and right channel of the Scorpio, we have AES that goes in, and that's 4 channels. You get 2 channels per wire, for balanced output. You get 4 channels of 2 channels of AES per channel. And so we have that, and then we built I don't know if I have that right. I thought I had it really close by. There is another connector there that we pop in that will give us the other 2 that are coming out of a service port on the Scorpio, the Hiroshi. It's Hiroshi, right? I always I always want to call it a Limo, but it's a Hiroshi cable that is converted to it outputs a couple things, but two more AES. So these are all 1/4 inches, and we had these cables built so that we would be able to do this. So anyway, so what happens is that we have the camera goes in here, we embed 6 channels onto here, and then we pass it into the live view. So now the live view is getting that, and the live view can handle up to 8 channels on the way out. So that's how we pass that out to the live view, and then the live view shoots it off back to San Rafael. So then we're going to get those embedded into it. Now this is kind of more of a close up to kind of give you a sense of this. Let me see if I can get this. Let's see. And this is what it looks like when we're plugging it in. One thing that these are, Mickey, who makes these again? This is the I had these made for me.
The connectors?
Yeah, the connectors. It's really cool.
Those are from Cable Techniques.
Cable Techniques. I have a box of them that I'm going to put together at some point. I haven't soldered for so long. I was like, I got to I got to practice a couple times before I take the expensive connectors and do it. So when we were down in LA when we were down in LA to cover NAB, or not NAB, but SIGGRAPH, I had the company called the Audio Department, that's really close to Film Tools, just make these for me, and they're great. What's nice about them, of course, these little right angles, they fit into that bag really nicely. Anyway, just a little side. And by the way, if you're wondering why the colors, they are in resistor color code, so that I don't have to look at any of the tags. I can just look at the color, and I know what channel they go into. So these are our mic inputs, and then this is the Ambisonic inputs that we have there. And then this is what the rig has to look like. Now you don't see the mic. For some reason I didn't take a picture with the mic up, but there's just a sound pole with the mic that would normally be here to pick this up. But this is why we have to get it all compact here. So this is our audio. This is the Scorpio that's there that has to kind of work around with Peter. Peter is a tank, by the way. He's carrying all this stuff. He's got a live view on the back and a Scorpio in the front. And so we've got all the cameras are actually not wired. They're coming in wireless. So these are wireless cameras coming in. That's all being embedded in here and then wrapped into the live view from behind him. Now, what happens after that is that I'm going to draw here. So you have the live view, and it's going to pass it back into another live view receiver. So this is an LU 4000. Let me make this a little thinner. 4000. There we go. And so from that LU 4000, we send that out to we have a FSHDR. This is an AJA FSHDR. And we do HDR out of this as well during this. I'm not talking about that today, but that's what we do there. Now, from the FSHDR, we need to de-embed it. So the FSHDR, we're going to grab those channels and de-embed them from the SDI signal. And then we're sending that via MADI to a RME. What's the model name again, Mickey?
It's the Digiface Dante.
The Digiface Dante. So the RME turns that into Dante. And then so this becomes Dante, and then this comes back into this is sent via Dante into our Mac Mini. So this is a Mac Mini, and it's got Pro Tools, and it also has our plugin. Mickey will talk about the software here. This is all mixed here, and then it comes back and is re-embedded via the FSHDR, and then from the FSHDR, it's sent out to a elemental link, and then off to the internet. And then that is simply defined as a 5.1. So it's a relatively, I mean, in my world, this is a relatively simple process, but it is something that we found, I think, has worked pretty well. Now, what I'm going to do is hand off the software aspect of this to Mickey to kind of describe how we de-embed those, because those Ambisonics are not pure channels. They're not 5.1 channels. They're a field, and Mickey can talk about this a little bit more, and then how we remix those with the mics. Because remember, we have what's going along here are 4 Ambisonic and 2 mics, and we could do up to 4 mics there, and passing them back in. So go ahead, Mickey, why don't you take it away and talk a little bit about how the software works?
Cool, yeah. So we're doing the decoding of the A format Ambisonics signal within Pro Tools, and that's primarily because that was at that time a tool that was easy for us to implement and also relatively affordable to get into the system. There are, of course, full hardware broadcast mixing consoles from the likes of Lavo, SSL, and I believe Calorec also has a native Ambisonics decoding built in, but I've only had my hands on Lavo and also SSL boards that do it. I'm going to share with you the Pro Tools session that's doing all this decoding and also mixing in of the raw handheld microphone feeds. So what we have here is these are the 2 handheld mics come in on these channels, and they then what they have in terms of processing, it's just basic EQ, just a high pass filter. I didn't do any fancy EQ on the whole 5.1 test. I did not do any dynamics processing on it. It's pretty much in decode level, very, very basic high pass, low pass, and then out the door. So these channels, these handheld mics, are being fed into this. These mono mics are being fed into this 5.1 bus, and then gets sent straight out back to be embedded into the SDI stream. The Ambisonics,
and specifically, those sit in the center channel, right? When they go back out.
If I open up these channels, they are only panned in the center channel, and I did not hard route them just to the center channels in case we did want to play around, but dialogue dead center only, please. Thank you.
Well, and one thing that's important is that the center channel is really important for what we're doing here. Typically, what you do is you have, when we think about, especially when we work with people who do a lot of music, they want to create what we call a phantom center by using the left and right at equal volumes, so that you have a phantom center. By the advantage of having that center channel is it comes right down that middle area. So if someone has surround, they're going to hear it coming right down the center. It also makes a difference for a lot of the productions I work on, is that they also come down the center channel of a theater. If you do stereo in a very large space, if you're sitting in the left, it'll feel like it's weighted to the left. If you sit it to the right, it'll feel like it's weighted to the right. And so by the center channel becomes very important to us as we make all of those processes move forward. So, and the other thing is that now it means that we've separated the mics. We have a separate center channel that you're always going to hear nice and clear with lots of off-axis rejection if the mics are used properly. And now we have a separate, basically attenuation control over how that surround feels. So we can bring that surround up and down, and those are completely different channels or different processes that are going on, which allows us to really kind of handcraft how it feels to be there. Go ahead, Mickey.
So yeah, when we get to the Ambisonics portion of it, if I open up this folder here, these are the Ambeo channels, and I have a couple of zoom windows here. All right, so this is the channel where the Ambeo comes in. The one right beside it, to the right of it, is just a duplicate, and the Ambisonics microphone goes through this plugin, which is called the HarpX X.
And why did we pick HarpX? Because
For me, I preferred HarpX for this use case because it is relatively simple compared to the other plugins out there, like the ones from Dear VR and all that, and it's been fairly reliable in my experience compared to say what I have on the duplicate track here. This one has two plugins. This is the native Sennheiser Ambeo plugin, which decodes the A format of the Ambeo microphone and turns it into a B format. It could be either a Fuma or Ambix. And just I just want to note as well that for folks watching this, it would be really helpful, I think, if you go back and watch the breakdown of Ambisonic sound show that we had a couple months ago that was led by Professor Jeff Francis. Tons of information there, and a lot of things that are mentioned here would be it would help to have the background from that show. And I'll do the whole YouTuber thing. It's linked down below. And also check out the episode from after we did the NAB show of that's called How Office Hours Did It, and that would also give you a little slightly deeper background on the pipeline. So you find out how Ambisonics works, at least at the base level, and how we're getting the signal into Pro Tools. So yeah, going back to this is the Ambeo plugin. And then once it's in the B format, and we're using Ambix here as the format, that's being sent into the Rode Sound Field plugin. And this is taking the B format and then deriving a 5.1 output out of that B format. And I'm going back to that Ambisonics talk from a couple months ago. Roscoe coined the term derived microphones, which is a really great way of talking about this.
Well, and this is a separate version than the HarpX?
Yes. So HarpX is doing the job of these two separate plugins here. HarpX is both decoding from A format to B format, A format being the raw microphone feed, which has no timing corrections yet, and also doesn't take into account the specific positioning of the capsules and the tetrahedral configuration. So it's bringing it from A format to B format and then also deriving the 5.1 output. That's within a single plugin, as opposed to with this solution, it being two separate plugins. So once that is decoded, it is also this Ambeo channel, or aux rather, is also then being bussed. It's being bussed into this Ambeo 5.1 aux, which is the final decoded processed 5.1 Ambeo feed. And then this Ambeo feed is then also being sent to this full 5.1 mix to be mixed in with the handheld microphones. So that's how things are routed. I'll talk quickly about how we have this demo set up so that we can hear sounds coming from around. So what we have is what Alex and Kevin Hansen from 090 very gracefully helped us with setting up is a little test scenario here. So we have our 5 monitor speakers here, or actually rather 6. We have our left channel here. Oops, let me put a color on this.
And we run these as Mickey's working on those. when we check these, one of the big things we check is the channels. You run a 5.1 and we run these what we call channel checkers. And I built the channel checkers that we use, and so I get to listen to my voice all day while we're testing stuff. It's like it's left channel, right channel, center, all right, which is the LFE.
So
go ahead.
We have our speakers here. So we have the left speaker there, followed by the right, the center monitor there. And then the LFE, the subwoofer. Oh, sorry, subwoofer is technically not the LFE, but there's the LFE there. We have our left surround, and our right surround there. And then we place the Ambeo mic in the center of the room and somewhat of a mixed position there. And that is what we'll be hearing in this demo, that microphone that is in that room surrounded by all these speakers. So
And,
I'll
and
go
this is
back.
the Sennheiser Ambeo mic that we're using.
Yes. So I think I will just, to demonstrate, I will just pump some pink noise into that room. And again, this is physically happening in that room where those speakers are. It's happening live right now. And I'm going to feed just a little bit. I'm going to put my headphones on so that I can hear things a little better. And I'm going to just feed a little bit of what that Ambeo is capturing into feeding just a little bit into this meeting. And then I will open up the HarpX plugin here. And I'm going to open up this pink noise channel. And right now, the sound is the pink noise is panned dead center. I'll just bring up the contrast on the HarpX plugin here so that we can see a bit more of the visualization that HarpX is putting out. So I'm going to pan the pink noise to 100% to the left channel. And we're seeing that being picked up more towards the left. And to the right channel. And by the way, what we're monitoring here, both in the meeting and also in the broadcast, is just a stereo fold down of the 5.1 mix. There's no binaural processing happening here. I'm going to pan it to the rear here. And then now the rear left. Now I'll put this back dead center. Reset that dead center. And what we can see here in the HarpX plugin is the energy here is somewhat skewed a little to the right. This could be either because of the not perfect placement of the microphone. Like we did not use any laser measures or anything like that to place the microphone there and also to properly align the speakers. So one thing you can do, since with Ambisonics you are capturing a full spherical image, auditory image, you can virtually, or I guess you can adjust where the microphone is being pointed at virtually. So we can rotate the capture of the microphone here. So I'm going to do a full 360 here so you can see it move around. And what we're seeing in the visualization is a top-down shot of the image. So the sound is staying in place in the room, but we are moving how the sound is being decoded. So we can align this up a bit better and more towards the center there compared to earlier. So if we take a look at the arrow here, which is representing the pickup of the microphone, it's pointed a little bit to the right. So we're telling the plugin that straight forward is actually a little skewed to the right. Now, since Ambisonics is pretty much just a capture, and I'm going to bring down the pink noise just a bit. Since Ambisonics is pretty much just a capture of multiple derived microphones, as Roscoe coined it, each of the speaker outputs in the 5.1 realm is just a virtual microphone pointed in different directions. So I have here, like, we were aiming to capture a football match a couple months ago with Alex, and we were toying with the idea of either having the Ambisonics microphone in the bleachers that's closer to camera position, or wirelessly through the use of a wireless system, put the Ambisonic microphone in the opposite side of the field. Now, if we did end up doing that, I still would have wanted the side of the microphone that is meant to be the front to still point away from the camera, still maintain the same perspective. So this would have been the position of the mics if the Ambisonic's microphone was close to the camera. We see here that it's still one is still the left channel, 2 is the right channel. It's still a typical 5.1 capture. But if we put the Ambisonic's microphone on the far side, it would have been this preset that I made, just flipped around. It, assuming perfect coincidence on those capsules, like those capsules match perfectly, we would not hear a difference. It's just our derived or virtual microphones are pointed to the opposite side. And we can fully adjust these virtual microphones to point wherever we want it to point. We can rotate that around. So this is the preset that I made up for NAB. But for Cinegear, I wanted to experiment with something different, a bit more tighter pickup on the LCR, the left, center, and right. And this is what I did. I just tightened it up, the left and right being 30 degrees off center, as opposed to NAB being.
And how are you adjusting each
45.
mic?
So these derived mics can be adjusted simply by dragging.
And how do you control their width?
So yeah, I can just open it up, and I don't know if it's readable on screen, but within each of these boxes, you can see how many degrees it's off.
But like the back ones are a little, they're a little wider than the front ones. How do you make that adjustment?
So I can make it equidistant, but if I calculate how much would be how much is spread apart.
Got it. It's just that they're close together. I got it. Yep.
Yeah, it's just that they're close together. And it's similar. Also, the Rode Sound Field plugin has this as well. You can fully customize, adjust them.
And this is that Rode getting the same data, right, that you're getting in the HarpX?
Yes. Both of these channels I have behind here are getting the same feeds from the microphone directly. So if I go back to HarpX here, and let's recall that the NAB one, and then I'm gonna bring that pink noise that's being sent out only of the center speaker, get that centered up again. I'm gonna pan the pink noise to 100% left here, and I can adjust this angle so that it's we're matching where the physical speaker is. And then I'll pan it 100% right. I'll also move it here. So we can see that it is not exactly the same angle. And again, this could be the physical room. This could be the placement of the speaker, or also placement of the microphone. So what I'm doing here is I'm just aligning these pickups that's being sent out to the 5.1 field. So I'll close that down. I'm going to get rid of the pink noise for now. And if ever Kevin Hansen is in that room, I'm sorry for all the noise, Kevin.
I don't think we were hearing the pink noise at last.
Oh yeah, I took it. Yeah, I took it out of the program there. And let me get something that's a bit more nicer to listen to here. So let's get a little drum loop here. I'll bring up the drum loop. It's coming through, and then I'll bring up what's feeding the Zoom meeting. So what we're hearing right now is coming out of the physical speakers in that room and being picked up by the microphone. So you can get this. We can get this. Drum,
and to some degree, it's also picking up the room itself, right? So it's not just the speakers;
oh, yeah.
It's the room is reflecting.
The acoustics of the room.
Yep.
And that's why we can see some activity, because the left speaker is pointed a bit towards the rear right of the room, and that's why you can see some diffusion happening there in the rear right of the visualization. And the same deal if we point it towards the if we send the drum overhead to the right channel, we're seeing some diffusion in the rear left. And this is one interesting thing we discovered yesterday, is that because this physical room, if I go back to that image, the front of the room is a lot of reflective surfaces, a lot of screens there, and the rear of the room has some absorptive material. There's a couch there. There's some room treatment at the rear. I noticed as I was setting this up that I was hearing more reflection when I was sending sound to the rear speakers because it was bouncing off the front of the room. And hopefully I can show that visually here as well. So let me play that drum loop again. So that's being panned to the front right, and I'm gonna pan it to the rear left. And as you can see, there's a lot more diffusion happening there. There's a lot more bouncing around, a lot more energy spread out across the room compared to the when the sound is panned to one of the front speakers. And then another clip I can play back is you mentioned earlier, Alex, is that you have a channel ID that you've created that you hear over and over. I was also hearing it over and over for some of the projects we were working on. So I decided for office hours, I would create a little thing for office hours with the help of some friends. Well, let me fade that up first. All right, play back.
This is John Prado, and this is Channel 1, left.
This is TJ Asher, and this is Channel 2, right.
This is Bill Davis, and this is Channel 3, center.
This is Greg Kreckmeyer, Channel 5, left surround.
This is Chris Fenwick, and this is Channel 6, right surround.
So you sort of get a sense of how the sound that you're capturing is not only is the sound you're capturing or the source of the sound being not only is the source of the sound being captured by the microphone, but also how that sound interacts with the room. You could hear the natural reverb and early reflection and decay of the room. Cool. I think that's pretty much it, unless there's something else you'd like me to go through.
No, so and then that converts. So basically, you're now that HarpX is now delivering that that back in. So you're basically you have basically a sound field. So there's a field of sound that's being generated. So it's a sphere of sound, and then you're putting mics in HarpX. You're just putting mics to point at that. And can you point them vertically as well as horizontally?
Yeah, so you can rotate and it might be better to, in terms of visualization, it might be easier to do this within the sound field plugin because it's a little nicer visually. But this exact same thing can be done in HarpX. But you can point, like, say, what I'm adjusting now are the pink channels, which are the left channel and the right channels. And I can say that these derived microphones are pointed up, or the center channel, or the main focus of the entire sound field is down, and this is where the center channel will come out of. And same with the rear channels.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, and so you can move it. You can move those. So you're basically putting mics inside of a virtual sound sphere, and pointing them at what you want. And can you do 7.1, 9.1? Those are. And we'll do. Could we do 5.1.4? We're doing 5.1 right now, but we could do 5.1.4. So we can put as many mics in as we want.
Yes, pretty much like say with HarpX, there's a button here that's labeled channels with a plus and minus button, and I can keep on adding channels, especially like if I go change output mode to say speaker dome. I can keep on adding channels on the output here, although the channel that I have this plugin loaded into is limited, but you can keep on adding derived microphones and aim it at some source and send them to a distinct output.
Yeah. So that's how and then we can use that to convert back to. We're now sending those out as those 6 channels back to the. There's not really. I mean, I guess can the Ambeo really capture something you would use in the LFE or the sub?
Well, what I've been doing for our tests is I've been putting essentially a low pass filter,
right,
and deriving all the low end information from our Ambisonic microphone and sending that out to the LFE. Very, very faint, and I'm going to show you here. Like these 4 master faders are what I used for our tests to individually manipulate the Ambisonics. I'll make it active, and essentially here I have this master fade is controlling the front, left, and right. This is controlling the center. This is controlling the LFE, and this is what's controlling the rear surrounds. And on all of them, I have a simple high pass, low pass filter.
Go ahead.
Except for the LFE. Oh, no, that's not the LFE. The LFE does not have a low pass because we want that low end to come through.
Right.
And also the center channel has a drastic low pass on it as well. That cuts out a lot more of the high end compared to the left and right. And this is so that we can carve out some space for the dialogue that's coming out of the center channel, and some level adjustments here as well.
And if you go back and look at that, if you've got something that you can watch right now, I think that the 5.1 is still it's primarily supported by over the set-top boxes. So whether you have a Google Chrome, Roku, or Apple TV that handles it, I believe that it is folding down to binaural for if you have headsets in. In an iPhone or whatever, but I'm not 100% sure of that. I know it's folding down to stereo correctly, but I'm not sure if I think it's binaural, but I'll have to check.
My understanding is it's folding down to stereo. I certainly haven't heard from me watching it back. It doesn't sound like it's a binaural render of it.
Right. And so, but if you have that, you can definitely hear it in the speakers. And it's definitely coming out as we work through that. And so it is a pretty again, it's just rolling out. Like it's really just something that's just starting to roll out across. It was, I think, only officially rolled out on YouTube. We've had access to 5.1 for a little bit longer, but it was only officially rolled out to YouTube, I think, in the last couple of weeks. So we should see more of that. From a live perspective. But if you listen to those things, you should be able to hear it. And I think that as 5.1 becomes more normalized and as more people have access to it, and as it does work in binaural, it really does add a lot of flavor to the process. And I think that it's one of those things that we're going to keep on looking at how to make it even less expensive and simpler to do the broadcast with. But as we figure that out, the idea is to get it to something that a lot of us are using relatively often, as opposed to having it be a big lift. So we're just going to keep on doing it, and doing it more and more so that it becomes something that's normal for us. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I just want to say, Mickey, I get excited when I can figure out how to get my Unity and pan it to one ear. And the amount of work that you put into literally just this demo, just to make this demo with a live room that you're pumping sound into, it's really amazing. And I just wanted to thank you for
that's Hanson and Lindsay, Alex Lindsay,
they just set the stuff up. You turn all the knobs, and anybody could set a speaker up. That's not that big of a deal. You've done an amazing job, and just the fact that you've put all this brain power into all this, it's really spectacular. I just want to thank you for all the hard work that you've done and make it very public so everybody knows what a incredible mind you have.
Jeff.
Thank you. And I
go ahead,
enjoy
Mickey.
all of this.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah. Do you have anything that you've recorded? Like when we were looking at the tracks, I think we were just seeing some things that you had put in there, but do you have any recording that shows all the tracks that are recording?
Oh, all the multi-tracks that were tracked. This is a copy of the session for IBC, so I have all the IBC related multi-track recording tracks here. if I go to the timeline view, scroll down here. So these are all the multi-track ISOs. So we recorded. Let's zoom out. So these are in days leading up to the. Sorry, this is SIGGRAPH. This is this SIGGRAPH show. Days leading up to SIGGRAPH, I multi-tracked all the OH daily shows just so that to stress test the system, make sure it's good to go. It can handle all the signals coming in, process it, and all that.
So when they're recorded, as far as the DAW is concerned, are these standard audio files? Forgetting the plugins and everything else that process them.
Yes. Well, in terms of the multi-track recording, these multi-track recording tracks are in no way, they do not affect what is being processed and broadcasted out. And that's why I have them in this separate folder here, which I closed down earlier.
And in terms, and I'm thinking of post-production.
These raw recorded files are just standard broadcast wave files.
Okay. So in terms of post-production editing, we would edit this like any other multi-track recording that we're editing. It's in post, it's when we get to then processing it and generating our final render where all the magic of what you just showed us happens. Is that right?
In this use case, we have been using it live. So all this processing
understood.
here,
and I'm talking about just in terms of if we're doing this, if the goal is recording it not live and then doing post-production.
Yeah.
And we'll be giving you some opportunities to do that. So one of the things that's going to happen is I am going to be recording Ambisonic. So I'm working on the new countdown clocks right now, and so I've been kind of building the pipeline for those. And the new countdown clocks are basically you're going to see an HDR frame with I'm going to be capturing a light probe so that I can light the letters, the numbers with the light probe in HDR, and then I'm going to be capturing ambisonic of a location. It might be in the ocean or down in my backyard or whatever it is. And that'll be captured in ambisonic, and then we'll do the conversions to, for the countdown clock. But I'll be making those files available so that people can play with them. So you'll have some ambisonic recordings that you can put into your own DAW and play with. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be. I'm doing my first test. I'm not going to promise anything this weekend. I'm doing some tests this weekend with it. I'm also shooting some. I'm testing with a stereo 180, which I may post some of those files for you as well, with a Canon R5C. So we'll be putting some of those files up so we can start to play with them. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just going to say, to Chris's point, somebody has to build the race car and they have to do all the engineering, and that's a ton of work. Somebody else has to drive the car and make sure everything works. And so Mickey is our Michael Schumacher, and thank you, Mickey, for doing that.
I'm going to get to the questions because we're going to run out of time. Go ahead, next question.
Craig Kadoki in Toronto, Canada. Has anyone tried Austrian Audio's AmbiCreator with two OC818S's? Results or thoughts? Here's a link to an interesting video of them describing it, including some good resources too, and he's got a YouTube link there.
Well, this looks really cool. Have you seen this, Mickey?
No, I haven't seen the specific plugin, but I'm familiar with the Austrian Audio. The microphones that they're using there seem to be multi-pattern large diaphragm condensers, which are able to output 2 channels per side. And how they show it in the video seem to be with one microphone doing a front and rear, and the other microphone doing a left and right. So I'm not sure how they are able to gather height data or the top of the sound field with just those 2 microphones. So I'm curious about it.
Next question.
Dave Troutman of Edmonton, Canada wonders, are we audio people going to have to learn a whole new set of terms or acronyms as this capability becomes more popular?
Yes. That's why we're talking about it now. I think that it's, as we move forward, whether it's for broadcast or what we're, one of the reasons that we're showing this and showing the pipeline is to make it something that everybody's doing. We want to move this forward where it's not just big broadcast and it's not just VR, but it's something that people are adding to event coverage, to location coverage, to high school games, to, like this can be something that in streams could be, now that 5.1 is available in YouTube, we think that it's important for, and HDR, but definitely 5.1, that we think that many people could be learning how to do this. And what I will say is that my experience of this, sitting in my house watching it and looking at it, is that as more and more people do it, it's going to feel flat if you're not doing it. And it's not going to be next week that it feels flat, but within a couple of years, 3 to 5 years, I think, it's worth us playing with it right now because more and more people are paying attention to it. Go ahead, Mickey.
I think learning new terminology is just a fact of an ever changing landscape, especially in the tech related industries such as media production. But in any industry, there will always be new things that pop up. Recently we've learned about LLMs and AI. So every industry, there's always constant learning that needs to happen.
And it really, I think it's also the penetration of more and more people getting a better setup at home, whether it's just sound bars or other things. I notice immediately, like I have a 7.1 system in my when I watch TV. If someone's only doing stereo, I notice it immediately. it's like what is going, like it just, and for me, it feels cheap, like as soon as I see that, so it's, go ahead, Chris.
On the other end of the spectrum, I'm watching TV on a single HomePod. So Alex and I are clearly different. Mickey, I was going to say, so the Ambeo thing is sitting in that room and it becomes your ears into that room, which we're monitoring on the HarpX and stuff like that. I've always wondered, do you think if you put like a head, I don't know what you'd make it out of, some sort of, gel or something to mimic what a head is supposed to, and you put appropriate quality mics in the ear holes of that head, could you put that head, do you think you could put that head in a like a venue and mix a band remotely?
I'll let Mickey answer that, but yeah.
There are a couple microphones or microphone systems that already do that. One very, very popular one is the Neumann KU100, which is a binaural microphone, which is a dummy head with 2 microphones inside earlobes, and because the ears are actually shaped like human ears, they take into account the HRTF, the head reflex transform function, and it sounds like, especially if you're wearing in-ears too, when you're monitoring recordings from the K100. It sounds like you're indeed in that space because it's the shape of the ears that tells us where the sound is originating from, especially in the vertical axis.
And I saw this was when I was at the audio department. I think I sent Mickey this picture of someone experimenting or someone building this rig. I don't know when it was used or how it was used, but this is this is not the HRTF, but these are surround ears, surround ears that are there. This was just sitting on one of the desks, so you could put little labs into those, each one of these ears. It turns out that your ears do make a big difference in how sound occurs for you. So that mic, especially when you're trying to create that experience, because that's a whole nother thing that we talked about already in the past. But the using both the head and the ear shapes. And then that's going to help tell us both with timing and with frequency. That's how our brain calculates that. And again, Jeff Francis talked about that in the past.
Every audio engineer I knew in the 80s had a mullet with his hair cut over his ears so he could hear better.
Next question.
Jesse Mills in San Francisco Bay Area comes up next. The Sennheiser Ambeo has a higher self-noise than some other Ambisonic microphones. Are y'all processing out that noise in any way?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah. we're not processing, at least for the tests that we've done for these convention coverage shows. We haven't been processing the noise out because yes, the capsules used in the Ambeo are from the, if I recall correctly, someone please correct me if I'm wrong. I think they're the same capsules that are used on the Sennheiser ME66, which are quite noisy capsules. But we did not process the noise out because essentially what we were trying to capture in the environment was the noise of their environment. So I didn't deem it necessary to do so. But
And
if ever you're recording, like say something really quiet, like say nature, then you may want to look for a higher quality Ambisonics mic from the likes of say the guys that make the Octomic and all that.
Next question.
Dave Troutman, Edmonton, Canada, up next. Are you able to raise the front ambience over the handheld mics, elevating the ambisonic output and decode where front virtual is elevated in playback?
And do you want to show that, Mickey? Or is that something that...
I'm sure Zoom muted, Mickey.
Oh, can't hear you.
Apologies. So we can certainly do that either here within the HarpX plugin itself. If I go back to the preset that we have here, these are the different channels. Here I can raise and lower them individually right within the plugin. Or you can also go back to what I resorted to, which is creating breakouts of the different sections of the 5.1 decoded signal. And I can raise the front, left, and right here or lower it. I can bring up the center channel and also the LFE and also the surrounds here.
Next question.
Craig Kadoki in Toronto, Canada. Again, Alex, how is testing going with the Core Octomic?
So I've been able to test it a little bit. The problem really has been that I don't have a blimp for it. And every time I take it outside, there's a lot of wind. And so I'm getting a blimp. but the blimp, purchasing the blimp for that, I was going to try to retrofit the blimp that I have for the Ambeo. There's a lot of differences, and me going back and forth between the two are going to be really painful. Like I tore my Ambeo blimp apart to put the Octa in, and I was like, this is going to be a mess. So I'm never going to want to go back and forth. So I kind of left it there. I'm kind of piecing back my Ambeo blimp, and I'll be getting a blimp for the Octa so that I can make that more efficient, and I can just go back and forth between the two. So right now I don't have it yet because taking it outside recently has just been almost impossible. Like you get the wind noise for those things becomes an issue pretty quickly. So so indoor it's working, like it's operational, but being able to take it out and make it useful, I still need a couple more pieces of gear. And so hopefully later this month I'll be picking that up. Next question.
Jeff Cohen's up next from Miami Beach, Florida. In this example, is there any native ambisonic functionality in Pro Tools that you're relying on, or is everything happening with the plugins you demonstrated?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, and I also want to then tie together in my brain, maybe some others, if you could just talk a little bit. So you are, in theory, for a live broadcast, you're going through everything we're seeing, and you're effectively using this as your live mixer, and then you're also recording all these tracks. Is that correct?
Good, Mickey.
Yes, that's exactly what we're doing for these tests. We're using Pro Tools as a live mixer, and also using it to multi-track record. But going back to your initial question, Pro Tools is indeed able to natively support ambisonics. We can see here in the screen share that it supports up to third order ambisonics tracks here, and this is just to create a new track dialog box. It natively supports up to third order ambisonics, but as soon as you have to do any encoding or decoding to and from ambisonics, that's when you would really need to have a third-party plugin. So there are situations wherein you want to do everything in the ambisonics world. Say if you're delivering for YouTube 360 or back then Facebook 360, or if you're delivering for a video game that requires an ambisonics deliverable, then you may want to work fully in the ambisonics world. So that's what you can do natively within Pro Tools itself. But as soon as you want to convert between different formats or decode between a format to B format, then you would need some plugins there.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Sorry, I was muted. I know you are using the Scorpio for its AES EBU output, so for the live setup, but could you use something cheaper like a Zoom F6 that supports Ambisonic and it has 6 inputs and that has a USB output to go into Pro Tools with the Ambisonic feeds and do your Ambisonic mixing in Pro Tools and then go out from there to an embedder? But you would have to have a computer in the chain to do it live otherwise.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, that's precisely it. You would need a way to get, because the reason why Alex resorted to using Scorpio is it's a relatively portable box with enough preamps for what we need, and also has enough AES outputs to embed into using an SDI embedder. Other boxes that can do it are the Sound Devices at 888 also has enough ins and outs for it. And also the Dexcom Diva also does. Or say if you're doing everything wirelessly, even the Sound Devices Nexus has AES outs. Those are other devices you could use.
But if you're going
aside from an embedder with Dante. So go ahead.
But could you use the USB output out of a mixer that has multi-channel USB to go directly into your Pro Tools session over USB with multi-channel?
And the reason that we're doing it the way we're doing it here is because we're mobile. Like you could absolutely do it if you have a mixer. I mean, it's just you have a much more limited number of options when it's mobile, as opposed to when you can. If you're doing it in a studio, we could absolutely do that. But we were trying to capture the space and going through it. That's really the limiter. But you're 100% right that you could easily make it work and do something that potentially is less expensive than what I did. But that's the reason we went to that.
But it would involve putting a Pro Tools computer somewhere in the fields, which would be the problem.
Yeah, I don't know how many things there's another question coming up, but I don't know how many things process Ambisonic in real time in hardware. Next question.
Rion Smith in Trinidad, West Indies. Hi, guys. Could we do a simpler down mix of Ambisonic that still gives a more interesting sound for normal live streams like YouTube stereo?
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, as we mentioned earlier, the Ambisonic's outputs are just derived microphones. So if I go back to the HarpX plugin, I can set the output mode to be just stereo, and I can get these two derived microphones and pan them around within the sphere of audio.
Next question.
Next one comes up from Jeff Keithley in Texas. Why using software to mix and not a hardware mixer solution?
Good, Mickey.
As I mentioned at the earlier in the show, there are full hardware mixing consoles that are able to decode and process ambisonic sources, the likes of Lawo, SSL, and I think Calrec as well. But this is what we had on hand, and also what was relatively affordable for our budget at that time.
And we are having discussions with Calrec to see if there's a way that we can use some of their hardware. So stay tuned for that. Next question.
Peter Moore, Auckland, New Zealand. With respect to Apple's spatial audio, and apologies if it's been asked in a different way, how would one go about recording spatial audio with this?
You need a recorder, or some kind of field recorder. Now the smallest one, Zoom makes a tiny ambisonic mic that you can use. There's a $300 mic, I think, that has recording internally to it. I think Courtney's showing a recording device, but there's actually a microphone, and I believe that microphone has an SD card in it. I think Zoom makes one with an SD card, so that's probably the most portable. And I'm going to get one soon just to test it. But it's a tiny little microphone that you can use for that. But otherwise, with the Ambeo, we need at least something with at least 4 inputs to grab onto that. Go ahead, Mickey.
I just want to go back to the term spatial audio. That's a made-up term by Apple. Doesn't exist.
Not that he's bitter.
Not that I'm bitter. But typically when you're mixing, say, music and surround, you would be starting off, in most cases, from either mono or stereo sources. Or in some occasions, you might have, like, say, if it's an orchestral recording, a surround recording setup like a Decca tree. It's not quite often that you would have an Ambisonics microphone, but it's also it's also done by some people. But typically, engineers would record would have their tracks originate as either mono or stereo individual sources.
Last question for the hour.
Jeff Keithley of Texas gets the honor. Why use AES instead of Dante?
Good, Mickey.
The embedder that we had on hand takes AES in, so that's why we looked for a solution that could send out AES.
Right. There is I think Sonix makes a Dante to SDI embedder that we might use in the future, or we might try to test there in the future. I had some clocking issues with the Sonix in the past, in the not too distant past, and it turned me off from using it in production. And so that was but I didn't have enough time to DX it. So I was like, I kind of took it out of my testing pipeline because of some irregularities that I had with clocks. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I don't know as well if SoundFX has either a 6G or a 12G SDI Dante to SDI embedder yet. Last time I looked it was just 3G, but I don't know now.
Yeah, and this is what we are doing is 6G, and we are working on for NAB. I'm going to try to go to. We're going to try to get this. It just was a processing time thing, but we're going to try to be testing the 12G. That's the AJA makes a 12G, Blackmagic makes a 6G, and the SoundFX is a 3G. And so we're trying to get to a full 4K 60 for NAB for some of the tests. I don't know if we'll do it for the whole show, but for some of the tests we'll be doing, we're trying to get to 4K 60 for that. So stay tuned. But yeah, and that's why I've taken the SoundFX, as I said, I had some issues. We had some issues with the production with clocking that made me a little bit, I had to back away from it a little bit. But the other thing that for us was 3G versus 6G. That was great. Mickey, thank you so much for coming down from the mountain, the audio mountain.
Thank you.
and sharing your wealth of knowledge for us for today. It was just amazing demo. I think that we both talked about the validity of whether it would go for an hour, and it did. And there was a lot to show. And I think for subjects, I want to. I like the idea of us kind of digging in. It's kind of for subjects that we're covering here, not the basics, but the subjects we kind of really make it a real demo, and we kind of work through something so that we can really see the detail, kind of halfway between a normal show and a lab. So I think that we'll hopefully do more of these. Hopefully, if people let us know in Discord and so on and so forth if this was a valuable one. I thought it was great as far as really understanding how the process works and slowing it down a little bit. And so thanks again, Mickey, for taking so much time to work on that. And thank you to the panelists. Can't do this without you, and we can't do it without the questions from all of our viewers, our producers. Great questions today, both in the first and the second hour. And thank you to the incredible team on the back end that is programming this, managing it, and actually running the show on the back end. We really appreciate everybody's contribution. Today, we traveled 113,000 miles. That's 182,000 kilometers, and that is 898 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours.
Mickey, it even helped just to have the photo of the room to kind of put everybody in the space.
Yeah,
it was really good.
And there's actually an idea both from Hanson, who sent me the photo, and also Tlaloc earlier, who I jumped on a call with, and I was telling him about what we're doing. And I showed him the photo, and I realized, hey, I should show this on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great to put it in context so we could see what we're hearing.
And also to say that this is actually happening live. And
it was.
Yeah. Kevin has to be listening to this.
Something that looks so normal to us, but we have a microphone in San Rafael with an engineer